Definitely, before we create any visuals, know what our goal is. What do we want to have happen after we create our graphic or our visual and people look at it and use the information? What happens after? Know who our audience is. Are they strategic thinkers, tactical thinkers? Are they apathetic? Do they even care about our content? And then last but not least is create an M&M message, which is made up of motivators and means, because I need to engage that emotional part of the brain and then provide the evidence to the intellectual part of the brain.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are and wherever you're watching from. I'm Matt Pierce, host of the Visual Lounge. And guys, we're getting in it today. We're going to be talking about one of the challenges I think you have. If you've been a creator or you're creating like instructions or documentation, you've got a lot of words. And somehow you got to take those words and turn them into visuals and images, right? And we've got the guide here to help us to figure out how to do this better. I don't know if he'll make us faster or smarter, but he's got the answers and we can ask him the questions. So let me go ahead and introduce today's guest. Mike Parkinson is a geek. His words, not mine. He is one of 36 Microsoft PowerPoint MVPs in the world, a CPP, APMP, that's a lot of acronyms, a lot of letters, fellow, best-selling author, keynote speaker, and an industry thought leader. And, you know, some people say that, but he really is, guys. He is amazing. Mike owns $1 Billion Graphics and is a partner at 24 Hour Company, a premier creative services firm. And he is someone that, if I'm at a conference, I'd love to watch him present. I love to hear him talk because he's got great information about visuals. So please help me welcome Mike Parkinson to the Visual Lounge.
Thank you very much for having me, Matt. I am so excited to be here.
Mike, we are always glad to have you back to the show. And we're going to start off, we just dive right into the first question here because we always like to start getting practical right away. And so what's a tip that you'd give our audience about using images better or making them better? What's something that we could just get our hands around? Because images, I mean, look, I use images every single day in the work that I'm doing. I'm in a lot of communicating internally to team members, and I'm doing external communication. So I want to get better. So what do you got for us?
Number one thing is to know what you want to say before you say it. Meaning that, how can I create a graphic that I don't know what I'm trying to communicate? So one of the first things I would do is figure out a one-sentence summary of what you want the graphic to communicate. Make sure, too, that there's a reason for the audience to care. And I think we're going to talk about how to break that down very soon.
Yeah. So I love that, right? You gotta know what your message is, and sometimes that's the hard part. What am I going to say? But that's a critical piece here. So let's make some assumptions here. Let's dive into the conversation about actually doing this now. So let's make some assumptions. I have a message. I know what I want to communicate. Like, and we could, I don't know if you've got an example that works really well for this, but you know, maybe I've got an internal communication, external communication. I want to communicate to my customer something. Then what? Like, I've got the message. How do I, like, maybe we back up even before we get into how to. Why should I care if it's visual? Like, I think I know, but I'm curious what you would say to that. Why should I include visuals or think about visuals for this?
Well, great questions. And yes, I love the fact that you backed up because there's a few steps that happen first. And one is to understand that we're living in an at-a-glance society. And I don't mean that visuals are more important or more capable than text alone. What I mean is the human brain has learned that it wants to get information the most efficient way possible. Sometimes that's visual, sometimes that's text, sometimes that's auditory, sometimes it could be interpretive dance. It doesn't matter. The point is that we're always looking for the most efficient way to learn something. So understanding that we're living in this at-a-glance society, and we see proof everywhere we look that we live in this at-a-glance society, then we figure out, well, what modality is going to work best? So for this podcast, we're focused on visualization. And what science says is that using visuals often increases understanding, partly because it forces us to think about it more. It's easy to hide behind a lot of text and not really say what you need to say. But the visual, when something's bad, you look at it and go, well, this doesn't mean anything to me. Whereas a visual that's done right, when you look at it, you go, yeah, this right here, this is perfect. So then the next step would be to figure out what your goal is. So what specifically is your goal? Is your goal to get people to learn a new tool? Is your goal to get people to watch one of the most amazing podcasts in the world? Once I figure out what my goal is, then I'm going to figure out who my audience is. And those are two things we need to do before we figure out that message. So number one is, what do I want to have happen after someone is exposed to my graphic? When they look at it, what do I want them to do, to know? Who am I talking to? Am I talking to third graders? Am I talking to Home Depot employees? Am I talking to people who are in their 20s? Am I talking to people who are in their 80s? I don't know. Once I figure that out, and it might be a spectrum, then I can create my message. So goal, audience, now I can create my message. And I don't want to keep talking. Do you want me to tell you how to break down a message so that it is easy to construct?
I think that sounds like super valuable, and I do want to point out, like, the things that you've just said, like, it feels like before you even write that first, like, come up with it, like, I've got something I want to communicate, like, you should be thinking about these things anyway, right? Regardless of visuals or what, like, this is just kind of typical design. And I think I point that out only because I think it's so critical, and it sounds so simple, but things that are simple like this, if it was really easy, we wouldn't have to keep talking about it. But I see this mistake over and over. So yeah, let's break this down. How do we start crafting that message?
Well, so once I've decided that I'm going to come up with my message, I like to break it into two parts, because there are two parts of our brain that's involved in decision making and learning. The emotional part, scientists call it the automatic part of the brain, and the intellectual part, scientists call that the manual part of the brain. Most of our thinking is done with the automatic emotional part of our brain. It's very, very fast. For every one conscious thought, every manual thought we have, like 462 times 873, that is a manual intellectual thought or process. Whereas, what's your favorite color, or walking, or talking, or finding someone to be scary, or something to be attractive or pretty, those are all automatic thoughts. Well, for every one manual thought we have 1 to 8 million automatic thoughts. So I need to focus on that automatic part of the brain first. So I break my messaging into two parts. A motivator, which is for the automatic. Wow, it's a new one. The automatic part of the brain is going to be influenced by motivators, things that emotionally or provide benefit. There are three things that motivate human beings: pain, gain, and fear. That's it. I don't like fear, but I use it when I have a recalcitrant audience. And I don't like pain because it feels manipulative. By the way, fear is the fear of future pain, whereas gain I like. So what I like to do is give 1, 2, or 3 key motivators that motivates the audience's automatic brain. And the reason why I give up to 3 is because my audience, what happens if I have an audience that's strategic thinkers? And there's tactical thinkers. So I've got the C-suite, I've got management, and I've also got the people that have to get stuck doing the actual hard day-to-day grind work. And then what happens if I have someone who's apathetic also sitting in the audience? So you can create a different motivator for each one of those demographics. Then the next part is the means by which they get those motivators. So I would say, if my goal is to get Matt to give me a high five, that's my goal. Who's my audience? Matt. So then I would say, I'll give you $100 if you give me a high five. Motivator means. So then I'm more likely to achieve my goal because I spoke to your automatic and manual brain, your emotional filter, and your manual. And by the way, the manual part of our brain is asleep almost all the time because it's conserving calories. It takes more calories to go 362 times 8,742 than it does to necessarily think about walking. We just do it automatically.
So Mike, let me jump in here real quick, because I love this idea, right? Like the idea of motivating people and playing into the, obviously it makes a lot of sense, pain, gain, and fear. And two of those we don't want to use. I mean, in certain circumstances, it probably makes sense, right? Like, you should be afraid of this thing so you don't get hurt. Like, that's safety, maybe safety training, or safety, learning about safety or whatever. But I'm curious, in terms of, like, when you're looking at those kind of motivators, are what makes it effective to get across? Because I feel like, and maybe I'm not so studied in kind of neurology and brain understanding the brain, because it feels like you can tell me things, but like if you tell me something's really bad going to happen, do I really translate that to fear? Like I don't know.
That's a good point. So I was giving a workshop on presentations at an electrical company, a big electrical company, and I don't want to say the name, but um, they said they're doing training for electrical engineers who have to be recertified annually. Now, these people, some of them have been doing this for 30 plus years, and this is stuff that they know in their sleep. So the question became, why would they care? Why would they be engaged? Because I need to emotionally engage people for any learning to occur or reinforced learning to occur. So the challenge was you have all these electrical engineers who, yeah, been there, done that. Yeah, I could get electrocuted. So what we wound up doing to make it more real is we told a recent story where someone more senior actually was impacted by not taking safety precautions. So, for example, 2 years prior, a senior electrical engineer sadly was electrocuted and died. And so they said basically their message was uh, don't don't leave your loved ones unexpectedly. Follow these. I can't remember what it was, but safety protocols. And of course, you're going to go, yeah, yada yada. And then they said, for example, in 2 years ago, uh, Jeremy was working a job and he was doing it for 28 years and he forgot to do this and he was electrocuted and he passed away and it was so heartbreaking. So what that does is it makes it more real because the human brain has mirror neurons. So when we see or hear something, we begin to empathize or feel, unless of course we're a sociopath, in which case all bets are off there. But we feel and think about these things, and ultimately, I need people emotionally engaged, which is why I start with those motivators. If if we fear it's going to fall on deaf ears, so to speak, that meaning that the people will simply block it out and say, yeah, we've heard that before, then we have to make it as real as possible. And sometimes a visual is going to help with that. You see that in ads all the time, talking about something very scary like texting and driving, and they actually show a car running into another car while a person's texting, and our mirror neurons just light up all over the place, and suddenly we're emotionally engaged. I hope that answers your question.
It does, and I appreciate that, because it's like obviously in that example that you gave with the seasoned engineers who are electrical engineers, that like they could then see themselves, right? They could the mirror neurons that you talked about, but they could see themselves in the circumstance, and I think that's really a fascinating way to think about, like, how do you get across the message powerfully? Is one, how, connect it to their circumstance, and if you're been doing a job for 30 years, you're like, well, I know the problems, but also probably more likely to maybe take a shortcut because, I don't need to do that, right? So,
Yep. It's
okay.
if people take shortcuts, if their entire life is proven, I don't always have to follow these protocols and I haven't died yet, they make the assumption that, or I haven't been electrocuted yet, that's horrible, sorry. Then they make the assumption that, but me, I'm different. I'm safer, I'm smarter. And the problem is Jeremy was also smart, and
Mm-hmm.
it got Jeremy, and don't let it get you. So we're helping people, like you said, see themselves.
So, okay, so we've got these motivators, right? We've got this, we've got our message, we've got our audience, we've got some motivators. Here we are. We're like, now what? We got this idea of kind of like telling us, we could tell a story that might be accompanied with visuals. Help us also keep moving through this process, Mike. What's next?
Absolutely. So we've got our motivators and means. So, for example, let's say I want people to adopt a new process. So I would say, make your job easier using this new process. So let's say my audience is going to be tactical people, because my motivator is about tactical execution, make your job easier. Now, if my audience was mixed, and let's say it was managers and let's say it was strategic thinkers focused on strategic goals, not strategic thinkers, and people focused on tactical goals, Then I would say save money, lower cost. That's going to focus on the managers, if you will, and then make your job easier using this new process. So we would decide what those motivators and means is. So then we have to answer two questions. Two questions. Going to do the balloons thing. So the two questions are, what is your means? What's your process? And how will it make my job easier? If we can answer those two questions, then we are 9/10 of the way there. So if I said, oh, the new process is this new button found in your ribbon, and when you click on it, it automatically does your reports and emails them off to the stakeholders for you. Therefore, that makes your job easier because you no longer have to manually do it. So we would simply answer those textually. So all we're doing is writing down our ideas. Now, this isn't a graphic yet, but what we're doing is we're going from the goal to the audience to the message, motivator and means, and then we're answering two simple questions. What is the means and how will it give me the motivators? Basically, we're providing evidence or proof. So the emotional brain is always working. The automatic brain is like da-da-da-da-da, always working right now. Mine's always working. My manual brain isn't always working because it's conserving calories. So what happens is when my emotional brain, my automatic brain hears something of value, like, hey, do you want to make your job easier? My emotional brain says, hey, manual brain, you need to wake up because I need to find out if this Yahoo is serious. My manual brain wakes up and says, okay, prove it. What is your process and how will it make my job easier? Once I answer that textually, the next thing I do is I begin to chunk that information. Basically, I take that narrative, that narrative I just created, which, by the way, this process takes, I don't know if you've ever done this, Matt, where you're trying to create something and you've got, 5, 6, 7, 8 pages of text. If we had done this process, we would have taken all that text and condensed it down, which makes it easier to turn it into a visual. So what we're doing is we're condensing and consolidating the process from something that's very organic to something that's very repeatable. So now I chunk the information. So I break it up into chunks. So all I'm doing is I'm highlighting with a highlighter, with PowerPoint, Visio. You can use it with Snagit. Snagit's a great way to chunk the information. I can draw little boxes around it. So what I'm doing is I'm chunking the most important bits of information. The rest can go bye-bye. So then I have a choice. Do you have any questions before I continue? I feel like I'm just talking a whole bunch. I'm sorry.
No, I'm literally taking notes, thinking about some messaging I got to do. Like, okay, what's next? Okay, so this is great, and I love that. I love that, because these things are big. Like, oftentimes these messages are really important, like the safety one, or whether it's communicating to shareholders, stakeholders, whomever, right? So I love that this idea too, that you're also making it easier by just chunking it. We got the focus. 2, now we've got this kind of limited amount of information we have to work with, because I have felt that pain. 7 pages. In fact, I've got a document open. It's got like 7 pages of information that I need to process and try to start to convey. And I'm thinking, guess what my next step is? Chunk and, get my means of motivation, and then boom, I'm going to start chunking. So this is great. So no further questions. Just, I want to keep learning though.
Okay. Well, this is funny because you asked me at the very beginning, and I said, know what you want to say before you say it. That's that message. So now that I've chunked the information, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to assemble it to tell a story. Meaning that, let's say my goal is I want people to adopt this new tool. My audience are people that work with me. They're tactical. They have to do the job like me. And I say, hey, make your job easier using this new process. And they say, what's the new using this new tool or process? Doesn't matter. And I'd say, it's the button right here. You click it and it automatically generates, does your reporting and sends it off to the stakeholders. And so now you've proven it. So now I've chunked it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to break it up to tell a story. So what I'm going to say is at the very end of my story is going to be that motivator. You'd think we'd start with it, but that's how we start with our engagement story. But at the very end of it, it's going to be make your job easier. So if you do these things, you'll make your job easier. So step 1, you fill in your fields. Step 2, you press this button. Step 3, it automatically generates your reports. Step 4, it automatically emails those reports to stakeholders. And that therefore makes your job easier. So I've just chunked it to tell it and assembled it to tell a story. So there are two ways to tell a story visually. It's going to usually be an architected story or an executed story. An architected story is these are the things that come together to allow us to do our jobs. Think of it as a washing machine. So you're introducing people to the machine. This is the machine that does the work. Now, an executed story is how the machine works. So in most larger documents or presentations, you're going to introduce people to the machine first and then show them how to use the machine. In this example, we're just telling them how to use the machine. We're just saying, hey, look, step 1, you fill out your field. Step 2, you press this button. And that's it. So then I've got a rudimentary graphic. I've got what I jokingly call box line box graphic.
Mm-hmm.
Step 1, fill in your field. Step 2, press the button. Step 3, yada, yada. The last step is to simply find a visual way to show it. Now, you could show a process diagram, a step-by-step. You could do a stair graphic, pyramid graphic. There's lots of ways to do it. There is a free graphic cheat sheet on billiondollargraphics.com. You can download to come up with different ways to visualize something. There is a free PowerPoint add-in called Build a Graphic. It's free for ideas. You'd have to pay $199 a year for to actually make the graphics editable. But you type in your ideas and it gives you visual ways to show that information. You could also go to Google or Bing or use an AI tool like Copilot, Midjourney, ChatGPT-4 to type in your idea and ask it to give you ideas. I have found that AI is not quite there for that yet, which is why I still go to things like Build a Graphic or Google or iStock Photo to get ideas.
Yeah. Okay, so I love this process, right? And I mean, now it's just then you just got to kind of figure out what the format structure is. So, one of the things I want to ask you about, Mike, is that often in this process, words are going to be really important, right? Words matter. They have influence. The words you choose, whatever. And obviously that's maybe a different conversation. But once those words have been chosen, and let's say we've got a structure, whether it's a pyramid graphic or kind of your line box graphic, whatever it might be, outside of just finding these ideas, Googling, using these tools that you just mentioned, which I think are great resources, when you're thinking about how to really convey that well visually, is there something that are there questions you're asking yourself, or are there things that you're thinking of other than just going kind of searching and hoping? Because sometimes I search and I feel like I'm stumbling upon things versus being as intentional as I could be. So what advice would you give?
Well, the number one thing is I struggle with that too. So that's why I created the graphic cheat sheet. Again, it's free. It's a matrix. So the matrix basically helps you say, what message are you trying to communicate? Hierarchy, architecture or structure, process or flow, synergy, relationships, time. So you would pick from that category. Think of it as the table. Down the left side, there are 14 different key concepts that we're communicating. And in all my years of doing this, 30 plus years, I haven't found any more than those 14 at its core. And then you would pick a graphic type in that row. So what I'm doing is I'm saying if then. If you're trying to communicate process, here are the standard graphic types that work. Here is what they look like. Pick the one you think resonates or spins your story. What you said made a lot of sense. You said, hey, I stumble upon it. That's because our automatic brain knows at an intrinsic level the story we're trying to tell. And when we see a visual, we're like, that's not telling the right story. So what we're looking for is that graphic type that spins the story the way we want to spin it, because there's certain nuances that's communicated simply by the graphic type we choose. And for that reason, I created that cheat sheet or that matrix. It just simplifies the process. Ultimately, if you get to this point and you accidentally choose a graphic type that isn't ideal, you're still 99% better than the vast majority of people by going through this process. So rest assured, at this point in time, even a bad decision is better than not following that process. So you're still in great shape, Matt.
Well, I'm glad you said that because I was thinking through as kind of like next question, well, what are the problems? Where do people get? But like, it sounds like, look, if we can get down the road, even we don't make maybe an ideal selection, we're still ahead. And I think
Yep,
that's great. That's because I'm
we are.
guessing most people aren't doing this well, or they're not doing it at all, and so you're not making any decisions, which is problematic for us, right?
Yes, absolutely. And that's the number one thing is following the process up to the point. If people just followed the process up to the point where they had that message, that's the hardest part. You said it. The hardest part is summarize what you're trying to say in one sentence. Good luck with that. Oh, and by the way, you have to motivate these people to care. That's hard. However, if we had done this for our white papers, for our videos, for our presentations, for our infographics, for our proposals, we would be far more successful. And I suspect a lot of people do it. They just do it organically, which means that instead of taking hours to do, they take days, weeks, sometimes months to do what we could have done in hours.
Yeah. Well, I want to shift gears just a little bit because we're running close on time, and I want to just be respectful of that. But I do want to ask you because you brought up AI, that it's not good at finding these kind of specific things, but the world's obviously changing. AI is obviously out there. People are starting to use it more and more. Its capabilities are getting greater. Is there part of this process you think that AI has value in as we go from words to visuals, that it's helpful at this point, or should we be incorporating it at all in this process?
Absolutely. There are three things that I've learned using AI. I was a reasonably early adopter with AI, and the three conclusions I came to was, as a creative, AI is always going to be a smart start. So if you think of it as a helper, it's always going to be helpful. Firefly, Midjourney, DALL-E, any one of these Hotpot, any one of these AI tools is good for getting ideas, grist for the mill. Now, are they great at infographics yet? Not really. Is there anything out there that's good at it yet? Not really. There will be. Will it be able to replace creatives? No. So it's always going to be a smart start, and use it as inspiration, curated inspiration, if you will. The other two things are that just like the Internet of Things became ubiquitous, AI will be ubiquitous, meaning it will be woven into everything that we do. So there will be two type of creatives, two type of designers, if you will. There is going to be, and this is flip to say, and I don't mean it, this is hyperbole, but you'll know what I mean. There'll be two types of designers: people that use AI effectively, people that don't really have a lot of work, because it's going to improve efficiency. That's ultimately, it's not going to replace a designer. It's going to improve efficiency, just like Adobe Photoshop did, just like Quark Express did many years ago, just like Camtasia does. This is all about improving efficiency. It's not replacing anybody. It's augmenting. It's a tool. And the third thing is that so use it or be impacted. Have your profession be impacted. You might not make as much money or have as much work. And number three is we have to learn how to use it. So it's changing so fast. Oh my gosh, it's changing so fast. So staying abreast of what's going on, follow things like Creative Pro, follow things like the Visual Lounge podcast, follow these things, see what people are saying, see what these experts, and when I say experts, remember, an expert has probably only been doing this for about a year now. So that's pretty crazy that an expert in AI is probably mostly for AI design has probably been doing it for a year. That's mind-blowing to me. Still, follow them. They've made the mistakes for you. So those are the three things. So yes, use AI in your workflow. Absolutely. Yes, use it for inspiration.
Yeah. Well, I you mentioned you're an early adopter, and I'm thinking, well, what? He's been 2 years, a year and a half. It's like we're all kind of early adopters if we're using it at all. So, but great, excellent points, well said, and I appreciate that perspective because I do think as we look at this process of using images in our work better, I think there is a lot of lift there that can be done, and I appreciate your perspective on that and adding to it. So. Well, Mike, we've come to the end of our time, so we're going to jump into our speed round question. If you're new to the show, these are quick questions determined by the roll of dice, so we're going to play a quick stinger. Here we go. All right, let's bring up the dice tower. Here it is, the TechSmith dice tower. First roll of the die, and it is question number 12. So, Mike, if you have one tool that's your go-to tool, it could be physical, it could be software, it could be whatever, that you use on a regular basis to get your job done, what is that tool?
It's pretty easy. I'm going to use my iPad and my Apple Pencil with Adobe came out with this free tool, and it is called Adobe Fresco. That's what I'd use.
Yeah, awesome. I love that. Sketching all the time, I bet. Ideas and things. Oh, well, great. Okay, so here's our next roll of the die. Look at that. Number 7. Okay, Mike, this is a little tougher one. If you had to shift careers out of your world working, you're a presenter, you work with graphics, you do lots of things, and you could do anything else but that, what would you do?
Oh my gosh. I definitely want to be in service to others. Anything that involves mentorship. So if I could work one-on-one with people and share what I've learned that doesn't work, because I've done so many things that didn't work, anything that helps other people achieve their goals, that's what I'd like to do. So mentorship is the first thing that comes to mind.
Well, I love that answer because I've seen you present and teach and work with people, and you're fantastic at it. So, but here we go. Last roll of the die. We can't do 2 12s, but we can do a 6. So the dot is at the bottom. Okay. Do you like stories, Mike? I assume you like stories. If you could be the hero in any story, what would you choose and why?
Oh my gosh, story in any hero in any story. Holy macarelli.
Nice for a Friday morning, right? Put you on the spot.
Oh, I know. I'm a big comic book nerd, so I'm gonna cop out here. I'm going to say, and this sounds so self-aggrandizing, so forgive me. Superman. So what a cool story. Not because I'm all powerful, but because of the baggage and the responsibility that comes with that is mind blowing. So I'd love to be able to do these amazing things, like be super powerful and fly. But I'd also like to see that if I could rise to the occasion of not being a complete jerk face, having godlike powers, that'd be fascinating.
Yeah, that's interesting. An interesting perspective on it, because that's always kind of the flaw with Superman as a decision is like, he there's really no weakness. Sure, how much kryptonite is there in the world? There's not much or whatever. But yeah, would you become selfish in that, or would you take over? Like people, obviously, certain tendencies of people, would use it differently. So
absolutely.
Not to get too nerdy, but to quote, obviously the famous Spider-Man quote from Uncle Ben: "With great power comes great responsibility." So. Well, Mike, this has been fantastic to talk to you. If people want to connect with you, they want to learn more from you, where should they go?
If you go to billiondollargraphics.com, you can email me at mike@billiondollargraphics.com. That's my website. I also own a graphic services firm called 24 Hour Company. By the way, never name your company 24 Hour Company because no one wants to work there. But 24 Hour Company, if you go to 24hrco.com, you'll learn more about both companies. So billiondollargraphics.com and 24hrco.com are 2 ways that you can see what I'm up to, and email me at mike@billiondollargraphics.com.
Well, we will put the website links in the descriptions, stuff like that, so people can easily find those. And Mike, as we wrap up today, we always like to end on our final take. So Mike, what is your final take for the Visual Lounge?
Definitely, before we create any visuals, know what our goal is. What do we want to have happen after we create our graphic or visual and people look at it and use the information? What happens after? Know who our audience is. Are they strategic thinkers, tactical thinkers? Are they apathetic? Do they even care about our content? And then last but not least is create an M&M message, which is made up of motivators and means, because I need to engage that emotional part of the brain and then provide the evidence to the intellectual part of the brain.
Fantastic. Well, Mike, thank you for joining me today.
I'm excited. Thank you very much, Matt. Always a pleasure to geek out with you, my friend.
Absolutely. Well, everybody, I hope you were enjoying the geeking out. I know I'm literally taking notes during what Mike was having to say because there's so much good information in there. Hopefully you'll get the chance to take this and apply this. And if you have a visual that you create because of what Mike's been talking about, I'd love to see it. I'd love to have you share it with us. You can always email us at thevisuallounge@techsmith.com. Of course, you can always like, subscribe, leave comments. That helps us and helps others find the show. And of course, we're all about getting better. We want to get better in using visuals. We want to get better in using video. We want to help you to do that in a way that is sustainable and successful. Of course, TechSmith has great tools. We hope you'll check those out. Hopefully you find the Visual Lounge helps you in that as well. And we hope you take a little time to level up every single day. Thanks, everybody.